This is a Your Farm Business podcast with Mike Krause of P2P Agri.
The team at Your Business podcast is guided by questions we get through social media from farmers. And in recent times, this has been more about farm family succession. So I've decided to put a series of podcasts together covering these three key questions. Firstly, why is it so difficult for many families to get started with farm succession planning, and when should they start? Secondly, what process works best for farm succession planning? And finally, how can we avoid some of the challenges in farm succession planning? My next guest is Judy Wilkinson, who has been providing consultancies to families on farm succession planning, or more recently known as farm business transition. The mere fact she has been providing these demanding services over the last 20 years means she has found many ways to help farm families. Judy is also involved in farming herself at Snowtown, so understands the ups and downs of farming. Welcome, Judy, to Your Farm Business podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, Mike. It's a pleasure.
Look, you've got a wonderful experience in this space. Has it been a good experience for you?
Yes, mostly. Yeah. And it is something that I was sort of encouraged to do rather than put my hand up to start with. I didn't sort of jump into it enthusiastically. I kept thinking, who would want to do that job?
Yeah.
But so it was a gentle transition in, and it is rewarding. What's rewarding is watching others manage their future, manage their process. So I go in really not to tell people what to do, not to give advice, because I strongly believe that all farming families that are working together presently have got the answers within themselves. They know their business, they know their people, and sometimes just have difficulty getting the conversation going in the right direction. Because we work together and live together and do everything together, sometimes those, it can be difficult to have the critical conversations. So it's my job really to go in and direct traffic.
Why do you think it's so hard to get the process started? Farmers ask me this question, and particularly from the younger generation.
I think because it is a crucial conversation, because we're frightened of upsetting one another, we kind of make it a demon in our head to start with. We don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to promise something we can't deliver. We kind of make it hard, really, ourselves. And often because we're not really sure about what we want or what we want for others, or whether we're being fair, and we have this obligation that we really should be looking after all of our family equally. This is the older generation. They might be feeling like, and they can't see how it can be done. It just, they don't know if there's enough, if it has the capacity or the capability or even the skills to let it happen. So, and sometimes we know when our families don't get on and we think, well, why would we bring them all together to have an argument? That would be ridiculous. So what I think is it doesn't have to be. It is scary. Yeah. And it is so much a work in progress that we start and then we find we have to change it all because somebody's got married, or because somebody's had a baby, or because somebody's left. So we kind of make it more difficult than it needs to be because we're worried about not upsetting everyone. We wanted to keep the peace or
look,
keep the status quo.
To the next question, that really, when should we start with this process? Do we only start it when mum and dad are looking to retire and we do that, or should we have started a lot earlier?
No, a piece of advice, you should start today, that's for sure. But you also should have started when your children were born. So the conversations that you have over your kitchen table or whenever you're together in the car together, those conversations have to be true and honest and transparent, so that when you get to having to make conversations about really hard stuff, you know how to do them. So, and sometimes we haven't had great teachers in this. We have had, say, for instance, a dad who has pioneered and got the property to where it is today on bloody hard work and sheer determination and working alone. And he might have worked with his father, who was similar, just hardworking and living remotely and getting things done. And so communication may not have been high on his agenda. He was making decisions on his own, and now he's got to include all these other people when actually he's not a big talker himself. So, what I say is that you have to start those caring conversations about where we're going and what we're doing, even when things when there's crisis and when things change, so that you can have these difficult conversations later.
So really it's a process then. It's not just one or two meetings. It's a process over a long period of time to work through some of those.
I encourage people with children that, like if you're going to treat your children fairly in your business and in your will, do it from word go.
Yeah.
Don't start trying to do it when they're 17 or 20. Start doing it. So if we're going to have a conversation about who inherits the farm, the message they'll get is, if you tell them, oh, you're going to be a farmer's son, and, oh, you're going to be a hairdresser, then you've started the conversation already, and they might only be 5.
Right.
So, like if that's not what you're going to do and that's not what you want to do, you don't start that conversation. Let's go back, Mike, because you did say where and when we should start, but it's definitely when there is a change in circumstance in your business or in your family.
Okay. So the birth of a grandson, the marriage of a son or a daughter, or those sort of special, significant family events.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, sometimes there's elephants in the room, and I know as a facilitator for these family meetings, it's probably easier for a third party to ask those questions. What are some of the elephants in the room that you come across and that you have to then help the family deal with?
That they're wide and various, and often, and I agree with you, sometimes it's better to have somebody managing that conversation other than yourself. So if you realise that you've got something going on in your family that you want to address, and you emotionally have something at stake, financially have something at stake, you have a higher motive involvement, it probably is best to get somebody who can be the mediator or can ask the questions that you'd probably like to ask without everyone feeling defensive. So I think that's a great idea, get someone in. And it can be, somebody who you trust, somebody who everyone trusts. It's not rocket science. It's really someone who's going to be fair and equal. But really it's about encouraging people to think about what they're hoping for, and also work out what people's expectations are. Now, sometimes people don't know what their expectations are until they aren't fulfilled. So they can be a bit tricky. You get stuff above the surface and you get stuff below the surface. And often a facilitator can dig around a bit to find out what's below the surface, because it's best talked about if you can. And what I like to encourage people to do is to think about their business as a business, and get that bit sorted, and let their family be a family, and get and sort stuff out in that environment. So, that's sort of...
So separating the business from the family, because the business and the family a lot of times are the one thing, because we live and breathe all the time. That's
right. And often that financially it's all a bit shady as well, because the business does things for people financially. Yeah. For family members. So you've got to decide how that works as well. So the more business-like you can make it, I think it makes it a little clearer.
That leads me on to the next one then, is business is made up of management and made up of assets.
Yeah.
Some people that I come across say, oh, no, we've got to pass all that stuff off at the same time. And I'm saying, no, it doesn't have to be. You can work through management transfer separately than asset transfer, but I don't know what your take is on that.
It just depends how the structures are set up a bit, Mike. I'm not a lawyer or an accountant, but I come across lots of different structures where there's trusts or companies in charge of trusts, and that's quite complicated. One of the really important things is for everyone in the family to understand those structures. I'd have to confess I don't. I think keep it simple, sweetie, is a really great way to go. But like if there are complicated structures, the passing over of an asset, for instance, can be done well before the will, or it can include one person or lots of people as beneficiaries and the like. So it just depends what sort of structures they're in. I just look these days, though, when I do meetings and see how businesses often have the operating business in some sort of an arrangement and then the asset in another, and how easy it can be, if that's the case, that you can hand over some responsibility and some ownership of something that isn't going to impact the asset, which is sometimes the land and buildings and other things. So therefore it can be done in stages, which gives everybody some thinking they're getting something for all the work they're doing. But in fact, just being mindful of, you know, the unforeseens, like a divorce or a death or a whatever. So you can sort of manage it more, but it does depend highly on how you've got your businesses set up. But I do think everyone has got to be getting something out of it. So you can't expect the younger generation to work for nothing or minimal or whatever.
Yeah.
They want to know what, and this younger generation, even more so than the ones I used to work with 20 years ago, want to know what's in it for them. They want some sort of guarantee, and they understand it could be a bit different by the time they get it, but they have to know they're doing it for their good and their family's good, as well as for their parents and the greater family. So, you know, there's a fair bit of payoff going on there, but yes, I agree. There are lots of ways it can be done in chunks rather than whole-as bowls.
The other question I often get thrown at me is, the land values are so high, it's hard to be equal. Give all the kids the same amount, but I guess the emphasis to me is probably more being fair than equal. What's your reaction to that?
I don't think you can ever get it equal. Like you say, in lots of ways, even the businesses these days are worth, you know, without the land, they're worth a huge amount of money with plant and machinery. And if you're hoping to equally divide, you know, those business up into, say, 4 between your 4 children, everyone will get something, but will they get something that can continue farming?
Is it a viable business? Probably not.
Yeah. The fairness, though, that's another thing that I've found really interesting, is when you have a group of people together in the room together and you talk about it openly and transparently, and you give the facts so people know how things have to operate or are operating, and then you say, this is our intent, this is what we want to happen as parents or whatever, and then you ask everyone else what they want. Sometimes the answers are really surprising.
They are.
You know, people don't necessarily want to have a quarter of whatever it is. But what a lot of young ones say is, well, all right, if someone's getting the opportunity to farm this land and make a living off it, and they're getting that opportunity now, it would be nice if I could have something, and it doesn't have to be a quarter of the farm, if I could have something that could help me get started in something I want to do. And sometimes I'm surprised at how little that is.
That is.
Or what it is. But, you know, like if you ask, because it's quite often that children who have grown up in farming businesses know how difficult farming is, how 24/7 it is. They know what it's like when drought hits. Yeah. So they're quite aware of what sort of cash flow there is. But they're also aware of how huge the asset can be. So they can work it out. If they're adult enough, they can work it out themselves.
Thank you, Judy, for those many insights. To sum up then, for me, there are 6 take-home messages. Number 1, don't assume you know the answers. Number 2, use a facilitator to draw the answers out of the family. Number 3, the conversation needs to start now. Number 4, yes, it's scary to start, but the important thing is to start, because it's more difficult to delay this important conversation. Number 5, discussions need to separate the business from the family. And number 6, aim to be fair, because if you wish the business to continue, it is difficult to be equal.